UFC great Jose Aldo has officially called time on a truly remarkable career. The man from Manaus is widely regarded as the greatest featherweight in the history of the sport and leaves the promotion as the most successful featherweight, having defended his title an incredible 9 times over the course of his career. Today, we are discussing the sad news of Aldo's retirement and looking at some of the reactions from around the world of MMA. Let's jump straight in and discuss the announcement then. As the Aldo family welcomed a son to the world earlier this month, Jose decided it was time to focus on family and retire from the sport that had given him everything, and that he had given everything to. Given what he had achieved in the game, he was granted an early release from his contract, and is sure to go down as probably the greatest featherweight in UFC history. He thought he could now follow the recent trend of fighters trying their hands at other sports, as he is known to be a keen boxing fan. Having made his pro debut back in 2004, winning via head kick KO, Jose scored 31-8 across his legendary career, and went on an 18-fight win streak during his peak, stretching over the course of more than 9 years. Coming into the UFC as division champion following the WEC merger, he would dominate the division for another 4 years before coming face-to-face with mortal enemy Conor McGregor in December 2015. The Irishman, who had wound Aldo up during their worldwide press tour, knocked Jose out in 13 seconds, but the Brazilian would prove his mettle by winning his title back in 2016 against Frankie Edgar, before losing it soon after to Max Holloway. A move down to bantamweight then beckoned, where after a couple of early defeats, he rallied to win 3 in a row before losing his final fight. An epic career. Next up, current featherweight king Alexander Volkanovski has given his thoughts on the news. Ever the classy operator, Australia's pound-for-pound king has recently spoken about Jose Aldo's retirement, labeling him the greatest featherweight of all time, and delivering a warning simultaneously. Aldo realizes his days at featherweight were numbered after coming up against Volk back in 2019, losing via unanimous decision. But that hasn't stopped the humble Aussie claiming he still sees Jose as the featherweight GOAT. He then explained that what he's done for the sport means he is the division's undisputed king, referring to how many times he defended his belt. However, Volk's high praise came with a warning to the Brazilian, as he claimed that he was coming for that status. The Great went on to say, "I'll be honest, I'm coming for it. But yeah, he's got it. He's the man. He brought a lot of us into the sport. I still remember him before I started, and he was still competitive until now, right at the top. Crazy legacy." Volk then referenced the great Brazilian's ability to dust himself off after the disappointment and go again, often returning just as fast as ever. He also believes that as well as his ability, it's his humility that explains why people love him so much, before going on to label him a true martial artist. The game has lost one of its true greats. Could you give us your Aldo tributes below? Plenty of other fighters have reacted to Aldo's retirement next. Stay tuned. A who's who of MMA legends, past and present, have provided an outpouring of love for Jose Aldo after he announced his retirement recently. Former welterweight challenger and current analyst Dan Hardy congratulated Aldo. They called him one of the best to ever do it, while fellow Brit and current featherweight challenger Arnold Allen said, "Watching him smash people to bits in his swim shorts is one of the things that inspired me to get into MMA." Henry Cejudo regretted never getting to fight the legendary Brazilian before wishing a happy retirement to one of the greatest featherweights in MMA history. At the time, Cub Swanson, whom Aldo knocked out with a flying knee back in 2009, congratulated him on a legendary career. Respected MMA journalist Ariel Helwani took a slightly different route, suggesting that Aldo's greatest achievement wasn't the titles and defenses, but not letting the 2015 loss to McGregor define him. While former foe Max Holloway, who beat Aldo in back-to-back fights in 2017, urged the King of Rio to go enjoy retirement, another former opponent, Frankie Edgar, revealed that it was an honor to share the cage with such a legend of our sport. He was easily top 5 of all time, and former lightweight king Anthony Pettis congratulated Aldo on an amazing career. A ton of love for the Brazilian legend, which is fitting. What did you guys make of the reaction? So where did Aldo rank in the GOAT debate? Let's see. Jose Aldo probably isn't the greatest fighter of all time, but he's not far off, easily at home in the same breath as MMA luminaries such as GSP, John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, and Anderson Silva, Aldo was the owner of probably the greatest featherweight run of all time. As previously mentioned, the Brazilian notched up 18 straight wins during the middle of his career, beating all comers with relative ease. I mean, even his decision wins during this time were all unanimous, giving you a better idea of how dominant he was, beating the likes of Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendes, Ricardo Lamas, and the Korean Zombie during this era of absolute killers should be enough to cement himself in the top 5 all time easily. Still, just in case that wasn't enough, he would go on to reinvent himself on multiple occasions throughout his career. As Helwani mentioned, he could easily have wallowed in self-pity following the crushing defeat to McGregor back in 2015, but he didn't. He bounced straight back to beat Frankie for the interim title, but unfortunately, he came up against another fighter regularly mentioned in the featherweight GOAT debate, Max. He then battered the tough Jeremy Stevens and Renato Moicano before heading down to bantamweight, where he tasted success with a 3-fight win streak towards the end of his career. So yeah, we would have him in our top 5. What about you guys? Next up, Dana has had his say on Jose. Given what he accomplished during his lengthy stay at the UFC, Jose Aldo will always have a home there. That's according to the boss himself, Dana White. White said that Aldo would always be admired for his contributions to the sport, while stating that this will always be his house during last week's Contender Series. I told him, if you ever need anything here or want to go to an event, this is always your house. This guy from the WEC to the UFC helped build the sport, this brand, in Brazil for us. Of course, it is nice to hear White so appreciative of a former fighter, and he revealed that Aldo had made a great life for himself down in Brazil, having made a lot of money with the UFC. Dana said, "I couldn't be happier for him and his family." White couldn't help but reminisce about the time he leaped the fence in Rio after his win over Chad Mendes, saying, "That time, I think the fight was in Rio when he jumped out of the octagon and jumped into the crowd, and the crowd was carrying him around and the place was going nuts. That's one of my favorite Jose Aldo moments. Security doesn't love it, but I do. Great stuff." What was your favorite Aldo moment? And finally, not everybody was happy with how Jose retired. Stick around for this one. You can't please everyone, as we all know, and one man who wasn't particularly happy with the way in which Aldo retired is former heavyweight challenger Brendan Schaub, who now doubles as a comedian. Calling out the great Brazilian's team for taking the Merab fight, Schaub suggested they could have waited and possibly gotten a title fight somewhere in the near future. However, it is thought that Aldo retired due to having a baby boy on the way, so this might have been his plan all along. But Schaub did concede that retirement is probably the best move for Aldo, saying he's a guy who fights for championships. And you know, he had a rough patch from 2019 to 2020, losing 3 in a row. He lost to Volkanovski, Marlon Moraes, and Peter Yan. So then he goes on this 3-fight win streak. He beats Cheeto, Pedro Munoz, Rob Font, before suggesting that Merab was simply a nightmare of a matchup for him. Whatever his reasons for retiring, it was likely decided a long time ago to fit in with his wife giving birth, so we're not sure it would have mattered who he was fighting. What do you guys think? As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to stop by again next time for some more fun and games. And why not do us a favor by liking today's video, whilst also sharing it with any Jose Aldo fans you know of.